If you want to start your own business, if you're not quite sure whether that is something for you or not, watch out for these 10 signs, because chances are if you take a couple of these, you might be a lot more ready than you think. And a lot of these are actually based off of my own experience and based off of the journey that I had to go through before quitting the corporate world and becoming a full-time business owner. Let's start with point number 1. I used to get very excited to get up in the morning to get to work, but not to actually do the work itself. I was so much more excited to choose what kind of podcast or what kind of videos I'm going to be tuning in during work that's going to help me with my personal development. So if you find yourself waking up in the morning, not exactly excited to get to work, but during breakfast, you're actually choosing which kind of videos or which kind of educational podcasts you're going to listen to, then it might be a bit of a sign that you are ready for something more than just regular employment. Now, this started kind of basic for me a couple of years ago. I discovered the world of podcasts, especially the Tim Ferriss podcast. He's the author of the 4-Hour Workweek, along with many other podcasts that introduced me to this brand new world of personal development, marketing, and business. And I was just getting so excited every day to learn something new, and it reached a point where I was way much more invested into tuning into the podcast than actually getting any work done at work. The second one is, during meetings, you actually spend a lot more time daydreaming about your future, your goals, and your dreams than actually paying attention to what is being discussed. Now, this used to be 100% me when we would have these long meetings, and I would find myself with my journal pretending to take notes, but instead I would write down my goals, my visions for the future in the notebook, and I would even come up with business ideas that I would want to pursue. So, for example, toward the end, before I actually left the corporate world of architecture for good, I would sit down and brainstorm YouTube video ideas, think about what I could share with you. So if you go through a phase, I'm not saying just 1 or 2 meetings, but if this becomes a bit of a habit, you find yourself dreaming so much more about other things you want to do than actually be invested in the meeting itself. This is also one of those red flags that you should watch out for, which means it's time to become your own business owner. The third one is taking the lunch break to do other stuff that you find much more meaningful. So you're not so excited to go to lunch break and maybe socialize with your colleagues, but you actually prefer to either remain seated so you have that extra 30 minutes to work on something else you want to do, because this is something that fulfills you a lot more. I would start to take lunch breaks to go to a quiet room where no one used and actually take that time to outline YouTube videos, sometimes even shoot them, and most of the time take that time to do the editing. And that gave me so much more pleasure and joy instead of going to lunch and socialize with my colleagues, which I'm not saying that you should do this, because at the end of the day, like, keeping that balance is very, very important. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is that if your desire to execute on a project that you're a lot more passionate about outweighs your need to become social with your colleagues, then this is definitely one of the red flags to also watch out for. And that leads me to my fourth point. When you are at lunch chit-chatting with your colleagues, this small talk no longer really excites you, and you find yourself wanting to speak about topics that not a lot of people seem to be interested in. So this definitely was showing up a lot for me toward the end of my career. During lunch, all I wanted to talk about was business, marketing, the latest trends in social media. How can I create hands-off sources of income? You know, how can I start an online business? Is that even a possibility for me? So this was kind of like almost all consuming me, because it was early and it was new, it was fresh, and I wanted to share these ideas with people. And most importantly, also learn from other people so I could move forward in the way that I wanted to go. And then, of course, I would get disappointed when I found out that people are not really interested in these things that I want to talk about. But if this is something you can relate to and you can actually recognize instances that this has happened to you, it is a sign that you are more ready than you think to start your own business. This one is one of my favorites. But before we get to that, if you found value in this video so far, give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Without further ado, it is making financial plans so you know exactly how much you need to have saved by when inside your emergency fund, as well as your 6 to 12 month living expenses, so you have what I like to call fuck you money. Excuse my language, but I just had to say it out loud to really demonstrate the importance of this, because if you find yourself planning for this, it means you're actually looking for a smart way to exit the situation. So when you go to that meeting with your boss to maybe talk about a salary increase, you're operating from a place of abundance and not scarcity. And if something doesn't go exactly the way you want it to, you have the FU money and you can just call it quits and go ahead and get started with your own thing. All right, the sixth one is that when you have meetings with your managers for your performance report time, etc., you often get the feedback that you should work quicker, you should be faster, you should take more responsibility and be more engaged. Now, this is super obvious because all the things I shared before this was basically you being excited about anything but the work itself. And believe it or not, people are not stupid. They notice when you are losing engagement and when you really don't care about the job anymore. And that shows up with the way your manager gives you feedback. If you receive such feedback, another flag to watch out for is that inside you, there is no motivation to actually do or be better. The seventh one is that you've gotten cold, that you have resting bee face. Now, what that looks like is you are in a meeting and decisions are being taken place. You disagree with what's going around, but you're not quite invested or engaged to chip in your thoughts because, things I said earlier, you're daydreaming, you're not so engaged. It looks something like this. Basically, even when you are not saying anything, you're actually saying a lot with your gestures, which screams, I don't want to be here right now. Have you ever experienced something like this? Let me know down in the comments, because it's either quite common or I'm crazy. The eighth one is you've already set up some sort of a side hustle and you already have a couple of paying clients. In that case, you're definitely a lot further inside this journey of quitting, becoming your own boss, because you actually have people who pay you for whatever you give to them in return. And that was really in my case. Before I quit the corporate world altogether, I already had series of clients signed up for my back then freelance social media management business. And a couple of days before quitting officially, I had already signed 2 relatively big clients. Meant that I was okay with my rent and with my bills, basically breaking even, so I didn't have to worry about, actually having a job to keep up with all the expenses. Plus, I already had some cushion built out when it came to emergency fund, as well as 6 to 12 month living expenses. But in my case, it was more like 2 years. I saved a lot in about 3 years because I knew from day one when I entered the corporate that I want to get out as soon as possible. So in those 3 years, I saved up 2 years worth of living expenses. Ninth one is that you absolutely hate Sundays. You dread Sunday evening because you start to get the Monday scaries. You don't want to get up, you don't want to go to the stupid work, you don't want to do this thing all over again. Last one I'm gonna share with you is something that I actually experienced, and quite severely, to a point where I had to call in sick from work several times. It was the fact that I would get physically sick with the idea of waking up and going to work. Pressing shoulder and neck aches. And no, it wasn't just from leaning in front of my computer the whole day, but it was basically just the overwhelming thought of going to a place where I really didn't want to go. Migraines, crazy headaches, to a point I was questioning myself, like, am I okay? Like, is my health okay? This is so abnormal. This was a little bit my 10 steps broken down. They didn't all happen at once. There were definitely phases, so I kind of moved from like point to point over time. I became a lot more aware of this world of business and online entrepreneurship early 2018, so it's definitely been a journey, because ultimately at the end of the day, I believe everybody is the most happiest when they actually can achieve 4 things, right? You do something you love, that you can get paid for, that there's a demand for, and that it's going to make a lasting change in the world. And if you can achieve those, and if you can achieve those in the form of your own business, I believe you would be the most happiest. So if you were watching this video and if you wanted someone to give you the confirmation and the confidence to take the jump and get started, then this was it. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. And if you're curious about side jobs you can get started with in the Netherlands, make sure to check out the video that's popping up right now. Bye bye.